Well, good morning, church family. I just want to take a few minutes and talk with you because many of us are not yet comfortable coming back to church, and a lot of you have missed a little while, and you've missed being with your friends, and you've missed the encouragement of being together as a church community. So I thought, well, at least we can try to reach out to you and bring you some encouragement online. And so I'm going to share some things with you, hopefully for the next little while, and bring you some sense of at least still being part of our community. I want you to know we do miss you if you've not come back yet to the church at College Station. We'd love to see you back. There's plenty of room to social distance and wear your mask and whatnot, but we'd love to see you back. But I don't want to talk about that right now. What I want to talk about is discouragement. I did a message several weeks ago dealing with discouragement, and it comes from the story of Elijah. I thought what I would do is take some parts of that and just sort of share it with you for those of you who may not have been part of us over the last several weeks. I love the story of Elijah in the Bible. It comes in 1 Kings chapter 19, starting in, well, actually it starts well before verse 4, but all of chapter 19 and even the few chapters leading up to it. The way it goes is that Israel had been in a very dark period of time. Ahab was the king, and God had pronounced judgment on the nation of Israel through his prophet Elijah. And there was a drought, a severe famine followed that. God miraculously provided for Elijah in a number of ways, but at the end of about 3 years, God speaks to Elijah and says, I want you to go talk to Ahab, and I want you to deal with him. And basically, this is confrontation time. And so Elijah goes and he meets with Ahab, and they have this challenge with the prophets of Baal. Baal was the false god that they had been serving. And so they have this confrontation. It's a famous story in the Bible. I won't go into all the details. But basically the way it happens is at this showdown, they met on this mountain. And there was this challenge with these 450 or so prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of this other false god. And they said, okay, the God who consumes the sacrifice by fire is the real God. And so they both made these altars and had their sacrifice placed on it. And it goes all day long. Anyway, it's just this long, involved story, and it takes the entire day out there. And so what Elijah's been through at this point, he's been out there, he's been confronting these false prophets all day, and that in itself would be a little tiring. And then at the end of the day, he offers his sacrifice. The false prophets had been doing their thing and nothing happened. And so then Elijah has to rebuild his altar, the altar to God. He butchers a bull. That was their sacrifice. I've never butchered an animal, even cleaned a deer. I don't know what's involved in it. Don't really want to know. But I imagine it's physically tiring, especially a bull. And so he places it on the altar, and they dump water all over it. The whole story goes on. And then he just steps back and offers this very simple prayer, and God consumes the sacrifice with miraculous fire from heaven. And of course, all the people are amazed by it, and they said, the Lord, He is God, and everything. And then they decide to kill all the Baal prophets, all the false prophets. And so Elijah has a hand in that. I don't know exactly what he did personally, but he oversaw it. And so there was this slaughter of false prophets that went on, and I imagine that was fairly tiring. And so the whole day has almost come to a close at this point. The crowd begins to disperse. Elijah's day's not over yet, though. It's a long work day for him. So he goes up to the top of the mountain, and he has a prayer meeting. He begins to pray to God for rain. And this is going to be another confirmation that God is the real God. And so he prays for rain, and then after a while, a cloud appears in the sky, and it begins to rain. Elijah goes down and he sees Ahab still on the side of the mountain, and he says, look, you'd better take off. It hasn't started raining yet. There's just a cloud there. He says, you better take off for Jezreel because it's about to rain. So Ahab hops in his chariot, takes off for Jezreel, which is about 20 miles away. And the Bible story says that Elijah ran ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to Jezreel. I don't know if he walked. I don't know if they went at a leisure place. I don't know if he actually ran. But either way, even if you'd walked 20 miles, that's a long way. What I'm getting at is that this is a long, tiring day after this showdown. Elijah gets to Jezreel. The wicked queen hears about what's going on. She threatens Elijah, says, I'm going to kill you too, just like you killed all the prophets, all my prophets. And Elijah takes off running. He's afraid, and he goes into hiding, and he's very, very discouraged at this particular point in time. Anyway, I took a little longer to tell you that story than I intended to. Here's what it says. He went a day's journey. He's running from Jezebel. He went a day's journey into the desert. He came to a broom tree, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. Now that sounds to me like a very discouraged person, very discouraged prophet. I've had enough, Lord. He said, take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Now he came to the point where he actually said to God, all right, God, I'm done. I'm ready to retire from this work you've given me. Take me home. Sometimes discouragement can actually get that bad. Well, that's where it had gotten to with Elijah. I want to talk with you about discouragement. And first of all, just one of the things that causes discouragement is just simply exhaustion. Just physical, emotional exhaustion. Your energy spent, you're wiped out, you're drained. You know, there's a good tired feeling, like you come to the end of a day and you have this sense of fulfillment that you've gotten a lot accomplished, and it's a satisfying sort of feeling. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about absolute being totally wiped out. Elijah was physically, emotionally drained, and that can happen due to stress, due to pressure, due to physical effort. And it just sort of takes everything that you've got. You feel like a wrung out rag, and there's nothing left over. And that pretty much is where Elijah was. He had this showdown all day. He's been there all day. He built an altar. He butchered a bull. He confronted the Baal prophets. He ran 20 miles, walked, ran, whatever he did, all the way to Jezreel. Elijah's life had been on the line, and if this didn't work, he was history. And so I think by now that he wasn't really ready, and he wasn't expecting this next thing that happened. He's mentally and physically, and spiritually, and emotionally drained out, and then all of a sudden this huge threat comes his way, and he doesn't have the reserves to handle it. He still loved God. He was still faithful to God, but I think the guy was just wiped out. And I think about the story, and I think it's kind of predictable, really, what happened to Elijah, because exhaustion is one of the most common triggers of discouragement. Sometimes when we're facing discouragement, that is one of the biggest contributors to it, is that we're just wiped out. Our emotional reserves, our spiritual reserves, our physical reserves, we're just wiped out. Now, I know we haven't dealt with things of the severity that Elijah did, but we know the feeling probably that he had. Let me just say this, that it's interesting when you read the story, God does deal with Elijah, but he doesn't rebuke him. And at least not by the way I read it, he doesn't rebuke Elijah. In fact, he understood what Elijah was going through. You know, sometimes people will say, well, it's wrong for a Christian to be discouraged. It's wrong for a Christian to be depressed. If you were a good Christian, if you really love God, you wouldn't go through those kind of things. And that if you're discouraged, it's because a lack of faith or sin or self-pity or something like that. I just want to say I disagree with that. I think that's totally off, because I think emotions are a very normal part of life. And the important thing is not which emotion you're dealing with, but it's how you deal with the emotion. In fact, if you read the book of Psalms, it's like about a third of the Psalms deal with discouragement. Look at some of the situations that some people face, and anybody would be discouraged sometimes when you face things like that. So it's not really unusual to be discouraged. The deal is, how do you deal with it, and do those feelings control you, or do you, with God's help, prevail, overcome them? So how do we deal with it? Well, I'm gonna give you several things over the next few little videos about discouragement. But one of the things we have to do is just simply recognize the natural rhythms of life. It is natural to feel let down. It is natural to feel discouraged sometimes, especially following a major expenditure of energy or a major disappointment. It's not an unusual thing. I had a professor in college one time. He was an incredible performer, a piano performer. And he actually quit performing. He abandoned his performance career because he became so depressed after his performances, after his concerts, that he just couldn't handle the emotional up and down of it. And so he went into a career of teaching instead of performing. So it's a normal thing. What you just don't be surprised at it. I guess that's what I'm getting at. Don't feel guilty about it. Give yourself some slack during those kind of times when you're drained like that. And take care of your natural needs. When the battery runs down, the flashlight gets low, doesn't it? When the engine runs out of gas, what happens to it? It quits. So sometimes we just need to rest. That's what we need. Sometimes we just burn the candle at both ends. We don't exercise good self-care. That's one way of putting it. We just don't take care of ourselves. And we basically end up getting burnt out. And sometimes we're actually reaping what we sow because we kind of let ourselves get run down. And then sometimes it's just the pace of life, the way it goes. Look at the story again. In verse 5, Elijah lay down under the tree and fell asleep. He's out in the wilderness now, and he fell asleep. Once it says an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was a cake of bread baked over hot coals. The angel of the Lord, and it says he ate and drank, and then he lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So you see what happens now is Elijah's exhausted. Elijah needs sleep. He needs rest. And he lay down under this tree out in the wilderness, and he fell asleep. And you know what happened when he fell asleep? God took care of him. God began to restore his body, let him sleep for a while, sent an angel miraculously with food for his prophet, let him go back to sleep again, and then woke him up a second time and gave him a second meal, and strengthened his body, at least at this point, whether his spirit and emotions were rejuvenated or not. The point being this, that look, gang, we've got to take care of ourselves. It is not selfish to have your needs met. Sometimes just a good night's sleep is one of the best cures for discouragement. It's all going to look different in the morning. You've heard that phrase, you'll feel better in the morning. Well, there's a lot of truth to it, especially if how you're feeling was in large part brought about by exhaustion. So that's one of the first things you can do when you're dealing with discouragement is just take care of yourself. Just get a good night's sleep, get your body built back up, get your emotions refreshed, get your spirit refreshed. There's some other things, there's some other causes of discouragement that I want to talk with you about. The next one I'll deal with is isolation. I'm not going to go there today, but I'll just say this, that today we are dealing with the problem of isolation in a big, big way. And that will simply make your discouragement worse. Anyway, I've gone on longer than I intended to. I just wanted to step in for a couple of minutes and greet you and say hi. Hope to touch base with you a little more frequently online because I'm not seeing some of you very much in person. I would love to, but I do want to encourage you. Don't let discouragement overtake you during this time. Stay faithful to God. Take care of yourself. I know God's going to take care of you. God bless you guys. I hope to see you again soon. Oh, by the way, I'll say this. If you don't recognize my surroundings, it's because I'm on vacation this week. I'm supposed to be resting. I'm on vacation this week, and we are in Louisiana at a place called Lake Ramsey. You can find it on the map. Look for Covington, Louisiana, down in South Louisiana, where it is raining all week. Still raining right now. But, hey, that's okay because I'm dry where I am. Talk to you guys later.